Good evening, and welcome to another edition of Real Talk with Michelle. This evening, you're in for a treat. We are interviewing a man of God who is loved by many. He is well known around the world, and he has taken time from his busy schedule to be with us today. Let me introduce you to the man of God. Glen Octavia Samuels was born in the parish of St. Elizabeth, Jamaica. He received his Bachelor of Theology from West Indies College, now Northern Caribbean University, and a Master's in Theology from Andrews University in Michigan. Pastor Samuels currently serves as the president of the West Jamaica Conference, and for more than 20 years as district pastor, Sabbath School and Personal Ministries Director, Ministerial Fraternity President, Ministerial Secretary and President. He also served as Executive Secretary, Ministerial Secretary, and Personal Ministries Director of West Indies Union Conference. He was a speaker and director of the national television ministry Behold He Cometh from 1995 to 2002. Since 2002, he has been Speaker of the Word of Hope telecast. In December 2010, he was elected Ministerial Secretary, Sabbath School and Personal Ministries Director of the newly formed Jamaica Union Conference. Pastor Samuels has conducted numerous seminars, revivals, lectures, and evangelistic series throughout the U.S., Canada, Europe, and the Caribbean. He was one of the guest speakers at the General Conference World Ministerial Council in Toronto, Canada in 2000, as well as a devotional speaker at the General Conference session in St. Louis, Missouri in 2005. His passion is to see the church transformed by the Spirit of the living God into a vital, vigilant, visible, visionary vocal instrument for Christ, touching lives, serving as a victorious agent of social, moral, and spiritual transformation. He is supported in ministry by his wife, Drusella, a senior teacher of mathematics at Manchester High School, Mandeville, Jamaica. They are blessed with 3 beautiful daughters, Glenica, who is faith, Glenadine, who is hope, and Glenella, who is charity. It is his commitment to spend his life helping others. Welcome, Pastor Samuels, and thank you for making time to be a guest on the show.
It is my pleasure. Wouldn't miss this for anything in the world.
I'm glad. Thank you so much.
Very welcome.
The goal of tonight's conversation is just to get to know you. We know you as a pastor. We know you as a passionate preacher. But tonight we want our guests to get to know who is Glen Octavius Samuels.
He's just his mother's son.
He's just his mother's son. You say that all the time. So not too long ago, you conducted a powerful crusade for the Florida Conference, and it was hosted at the Ambassador Church. It was an amazing, powerful crusade. How do you feel when you see lives that are transformed right in front of you?
I guess this is what the church is all about, and no one can really take credit for it except to think that God, in his loving kindness and his mercies, would allow a sinner to have such an important role to play. We're just instruments in God's hand. Just as the hose can't claim credit for the water, it's just a vehicle through which the water passes. So also is the preacher. But when you think of the gospel and what it is supposed to do, and you can see lives being transformed, and it's not just about those who are not yet church members, but you see folk who've been struggling with issues, and you see them with this glow, this issue that, yes, God is fixing something for them. It makes you feel that God is still doing what he said he would do.
And you've been doing it for so long. You have preached all over the world. What is it like getting the reaction and seeing souls won in different countries?
It's a very interesting question. And sometimes the encounter reveals some internal prejudices that we have. I remember my first time preaching to an all-white congregation. There were only 2 black persons in there.
Wow.
Myself and the gentleman who invited me, because he has a daring heart, and he has some good friends that go there. He has a huge company in Boston, and he worked for some of these white folk. And so, of course, he feels that, that there was something that he needed me to experience. And so I went, and I'm not a whispering preacher. And
Definitely not.
I can recall that the pastor of the church said 3 things to me, and I have never forgotten them. One is that here we speak in conversational tones, whatever that means. 2 was that they finished church by 12 o'clock. And I'm accustomed to taking time to be holy, you know?
Yes.
I can't recall the 3rd one. But here's something that has never left my mind. By 11:25, they got through all the stuff that my church would take an hour and a half to get through.
Yes.
The songs, the preliminaries, the children's stories. And I wondered, how is it we take so long to get through this stuff? And so at 12:30, it struck me that he did say church would be finished by 12 o'clock. But by that time, I was just halfway in my sermon, But this is what really, really grabbed me. In the appeal, folk are coming forward. I'm not accustomed to being hugged by white folk. We're in the same church, but I don't see them very often. And if and when I do meet, folk who are not of my skin color, we're always busy and stuff. And I really felt bad, this lady. And obviously, the word of God was a blessing to her. And so she was just hugging me. And, I'm small already. And I felt myself getting smaller or forcing myself to be smaller. And she picked it up and she pulled back. And I was so ashamed. And I pulled the mic away and I whispered to her, I'm sorry. And she hugged. And we chatted afterwards. And, she said that she'd been married for about 25 years. And that day was the first time her husband came to church with her.
Wow.
And the first time she saw him cry.
Oh, wow.
Throughout their courtship. And so there are different things that impact you as you go. I was in England some years ago at the University of Sheffield. They brought together about 2,500 university students. It was an interesting encounter. And so they told me, they said, we know you are a Caribbean preacher and you're accustomed to thousands of folk coming and come to the altar. But don't worry if they're not that emotional here and they won't move. It's not that they're not hearing. I'm never bothered by those things.
Right, that was going to be my next question.
And so when I made the appeal, I believe that, people are people everywhere. Young people need to be challenged for God. And I saw those brilliant late teenagers, early 20s, middle teens, streaming down, coming to the altar. Because God loves our young people. And many of them too love the Lord God. And so the encounter is different depending on the culture you're in. And I'm just a plain old country preacher.
Yeah, but a good old plain country preacher. And how do you feel when you, just knowing that you're making such an impact on people's lives by preaching and just sharing the word of God? How does it make you feel? I know that you're not caught up in it. I know that it doesn't get to your head because you're such a humble man. But what does it feel when you're standing there and just knowing that by you sharing that knowledge that you have and the history, especially, a lot of your sermons are filled with a lot of history lessons as well. How does it feel? How do you feel in that moment?
I think that a sense of commitment is heightened but also with it come this awesome fear, because I got something from E.E. Cleveland. I never know how to express it until I heard him with it. I know I felt it, but couldn't express it. And he said he has a dissatisfied heart, because no matter what you see, you're always wondering, God, could I have said it better? Could I have done more to move one other person? So that whilst you're thanking God for all of these who've come, you're thinking, could I have reached somebody else? If I were a little clearer, a little plainer, would it have worked? And there's always this constant questioning of yourself, this internal reflection, even while it is exploding, in the midst of it unfolding. There are these questions, because it is an awesome burden. It's an awesome responsibility, and you can't treat it lightly.
Yeah.
And so yes, you feel happy for those who are coming, but you feel a burden for those who are yet to come, for those who didn't move. And it caused you to do some reflection in the process.
So do you often feel like the burden is on you for the responsibility of someone's soul? Do you often feel that way?
It is a terrible burden, and the Bible is clear on that, In Ezekiel chapter 18, he said, Son of man, I set you as a watchman on the wall. He said, hear the word from my lips and warn them for me. He said, if you fail to warn them and they die in their sins, if you fail to warn them and they die in their sins, their blood is on your shoulder. No, I can't take that lightly. Now, he said, if you warn them and they don't come, I will hold them accountable. So this issue of the burden is always there, that you have to make it clear. You have to present it with a sense of urgency. And of course, in any congregation, you have multiple different characters. Young people, old people, wealthy. You have those who don't care. You have the uncaring, the unfeeling, and all of these are mixed together. But God's Spirit is able to reach all. And there was a time in my life, in my younger days, when I just left school, you preach with these fancy words, this high-flown stuff, but I've grown more sensible.
Sensible. Okay.
Yes, I've grown more sensible.
Okay.
So I use as a template, if a child can understand. And so my primary burden is to make it plain so a child can understand. Because if a child can understand, the adult will.
The breakdown.
Yes.
The breakdown.
So,
in the introduction, I mentioned that you've spoken across the world. U.S., Canada, Europe. There's still some places you haven't been to. But for the places that you have been to, how many crusades or evangelistic series do you think that you've done?
That's a difficult question.
And it wasn't planned.
Somebody asked me that question, and I'm scratching my head and pulling on my hair, at least what's left of it, trying to find an answer.
Or close to a number. Or I'm curious, as I'm sure others would be too.
This is my 36th year in ministry, and I'm accustomed. I have been preaching before I became a pastor. I wasn't baptizing, but leading hundreds of persons to Christ. By the time, as a matter of fact, by the time I got to college, maybe upwards of 400 persons have been led through evangelistic series that I've done. It's a difficult question. As a district pastor, I would run at least 3 crusades and a revival or 2. The revival is a shortened version, because what you call a crusade here, it's a revival for me. I really, 2 weeks. Yes, I really can't
consider. We grew up on the 1 month and
I grew up on the 6 weeks.
Right.
I grew up on and even now, every now and then I'll do 5, and folk would ask for, we plan 4, and they ask for 1 more, and then. But so it's a difficult question. Put it this way. There's a former Prime Minister of Jamaica Edward Seaga.
I remember.
He said he didn't know the plural for mongoose. And he was in Parliament saying, and so he said, Mr. Speaker, they brought one mongoose here and several others. So I could tell you, I've done one and several
And
others.
several others. Okay, well, I'm sure it must have been a lot because you've traveled you've traveled all over, plus locally. So, not to mention the number of. Do you have any idea of the number of baptisms and souls that you've won? Are these difficult?
We'll have to wait until we get over yonder, and the Lord will tell you.
Okay. All right.
But for me, the most memorable in terms of mass attendance, the one that stands out in my mind would have been, and that's as far back as 2000, would have been my first huge campaign in Jamaica. And incidentally, it was the first program in Jamaica ever to be carried on live cable. I didn't know how, but I just have this strong conviction. So I went to the cable station in Montego Bay, Sinclair's, and I said, we're going to be having this meeting. It's right. If you ever come to Montego Bay and you come right into town, you come off the top road from the airport, right on the sea, we have this huge series. It's about 5 tents spread out there.
Oh, wow.
The two largest ones were 180 feet long by 60 feet wide.
Wow.
We have two of those side by side. And so on any given night, you'd have like 5,000 persons. And so on the Sabbath, you'd have like maybe 7,000.
Oh, wow.
We baptized 1,100 persons
Wow.
in that one campaign.
Wow.
I've seen God do some strange stuff. As I said earlier, you can't take credit for it. It might have come through you, but it didn't come from you.
Absolutely.
It is not of you. You're just a vehicle. And any preacher who thinks that he can take credit or pat himself on the back,
Right.
he has lost his senses.
Right. Right.
And so we ended up having it carried live on cable. So I said to the gentleman, it can be done. He said, Pastor, I'm in this business. You're a preacher. I'm in this cable business. We've never carried anything live on cable in Jamaica. I said, give me 3 days. Like Daniel, give me some time. And I'm asking around, and they said, no, it can't be done. But I met a gentleman who gave me an idea, and I said, look, we're going down to Sinclair's office. We sat down. He wasn't even 100% clear, but it's history. It happened. And I've learned that if God gives you a strong conviction, he already know how he's going to work it out. Yes. And so in terms of impact from the sheer numbers in attendance, it would be that one. I've been to Martinique, and that was my first time speaking with an interrupter. They call him an interpreter. Okay. But for me, he was an interrupter.
Yeah, because it interrupted
yes. I have done seminars with interpreters, but doing a program of that nature, that magnitude, was to me a challenge. But he did a fantastic job. He was fluent in English, French, and Spanish. And I was in Martinique, we speak a little French, but they could speak Spanish. And he went to town on it, and he had me, in those days, I was a good preacher. He had me going to town with him. Very, very exciting. And so, yes, I've seen God do some amazing stuff. And so from the perspective of the question you asked, it's a little difficult to mention how many. Okay. It's even more difficult to tell you about the baptisms. I know it's quite a few thousand, all for the glory of God. And I have been humbled and in the process to see what God has done. And it leaves you wondering, could I have made it better? If I had done this or done that, would it have been better? And there's always that constant questioning, because you can never be satisfied, not until he comes.
Yes. So I noticed when you were doing the crusade that you don't use a lot of notes.
I am too indisciplined.
So but you, a lot of quotations, a lot of history, a lot of songs, and Bible texts. How do you memorize all of that for your sermons?
Interesting question. So I'm in Costa Rica for the 1 week youth revival. I love talking to young people, but I've never been to Costa Rica before, and I was looking forward to it. The trouble is that I landed in pouring rain. That was the Friday evening. We were starting on Sabbath. It rained all day Sabbath. It rained all day Sunday. And for the entire week, and I was getting discouraged. Granted, the folk came out, and I wondered, if it hadn't rained, how much better it would have been. The place was still packed, but I'm always wondering. And so in my getting discouraged, and they put me at this upscale place in the capital, and they had me staying. I'm just my mother's son. You could put me in a little corner and I'll be comfortable. But they thought that they had to put the preacher where they think he'll be comfortable. And so they put me in this upscale place, and the couple, fantastic couple. I mean, the carpet in the house, I get lost in it. In those days, I used to be short. And you have to look long and hard to find me in the carpet. You ever watch the movie Honey, I Shrunk the Kids?
Yes,
well, I seem to have been shrunken in the carpet, But you're asking me about songs and stuff. And so I'm sitting at the house all day, and they've gone to work. They get back home in the evening, and of course they fix meals, and I love fruits, and I have a lot of fruits. But I kept wondering, Lord, why are you sending the rain and stuff? And I don't know any Spanish. And bless your heart, Michelle, I heard an English song. It sounded like it's coming from all the way the distance. I chased from the living room out on the patio, rain falling, and I hear, don't you worry about a thing now. Because every little thing. Songs for me are social commentary. And in any congregation, you have people of all kinds. Now, some folk will stone you for quoting those songs behind the pulpit, but some folk, it might be the one thing that will connect them to Christ. And so to answer you directly, I was an avid reader. In my younger days, and now that's a long, long time ago, maybe
Pastor Samuel.
Long time ago, I used to love reading. I read a lot. And now in my training of younger pastors, I tell them, write out your sermons. Make sure you study before you go to any commentary. Look at the text. Allow the text to be its own interpreter. Because the Bible existed long before commentary sets. And so you read, and the more you read the Bible, is the more you get to understand it. There's something in the Word that stamps itself on your mind. And if you love the story, like you watch a good movie, you don't memorize the movie. It just stamped itself on your mind, and you remember not all of it in detail, but clear parts of it. The same is true about the stuff you read and the Bible you read. And so when you sit down, I'm not a good cook. I know how to make dumplings. Bless your heart for that. I mean, and if your viewers are they know they shouldn't go through a whole day without eating at least one dumpling. That's a serious risk they take with their lives. And so viewers, blessed are those who eat at least one dumpling each day.
Let's talk about the dumplings real quickly.
That wasn't your question.
I know it wasn't.
I'm answering your question. So you leave me and my dumplings alone. Once, it's like cooking. You season up the stuff. So before, I don't know, you may have only vegetarians watching your show. So you season up the veggie meat and you leave it for a while. That's sermon preparation. You read the text or you write it down, and a thought come to you, you jot it down, and you leave it. And you're going to preach it maybe 2 weeks down the road. You come back tomorrow, you pick it up again. And you read a book, you look for some stuff, and it comes together. I think each pastor, each preacher comes to the pulpit from different contexts. We all have our unique stories. We're impacted by the word differently. And so I love reading. I don't get a chance to do it now as often because in my old age, in this administrative stuff, I discovered I've been afflicted with a disease called meetingitis.
Okay.
Yes,
overtakes your time.
Yes, these meeting stuff.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting question. And once you read, and I pick carefully what I read. Sure enough, I don't just read Bible. I don't just read religious books. I love to read widely. I'll buy a book for just one chapter. And so I will make notes. I'll do jottings. And when I'm going to be pulling the sermon together, I look at the number of stuff, but I am too indisciplined to look down on the paper. Maybe it would have been 100 times more impactful if I were a little more disciplined.
No.
Can you imagine how much more impacting it would have been on you if I were a little more disciplined?
It works just fine.
Thanks to, I tell folk, you know, that the preacher can't take any credit. So when the foolishness leaves my mouth, the Lord grabs it in mid-air. So before it comes to your ear, he fixes it up.
He cleans it up.
Yes, it's all he's doing.
Because you're so relatable, like you said, that one person, you know, it may just be that song.
Yes.
But some of the songs that I hear you singing a line or two from, I'm wondering, where does he know that song from?
If you're going to talk to senior citizens, you have to look at what they look at. Try to listen to what they listen to. Try to get into their world. And the same is true. The only difference is that when you come to church, you have the seniors, you have the youngsters, you have the middle age, and it's a mixture of all. And when you get done, the sermon is never perfect because there are so many things you wish you could have put in there. But you pray earnestly. And I've always said that it's not mechanical. With the best of your intellect, you have to understand that this is only meaningful if God's Spirit gets a hold of it.
Yes. Because then it exudes through you.
Indeed.
Yes.
You're just a vehicle.
Yes. So let's talk about the fact that you were not raised a Seventh-day Adventist.
I thought to say the fact that I love dumplings, but
well, we're going to get to that.
You know, I was in New York City, and when I call my friends and tell them I found a store and written in bold letters, the dumpling shop, they didn't believe me.
Really?
So I
grew up
asked,
in New York. I don't know.
So I asked Milton Gregory, and I took the picture. I took the picture and I WhatsApped the picture home. They said, "Wow."
Really?
Yes.
Really?
That must have been a wise businessman.
The Jamaican dumplings were?
Good old dumplings.
Really?
Yes. I'm not sure if it's Jamaican, but I just know the dumplings. Yes. The dumpling shop.
Okay.
So I thought you were going to ask about the dumpling, but back to your
no,
question.
No, we could do that. We could do it. We're having some real talk. we know you love dumplings, and I do too, but it seems like you have the world record on on dumplings. What's the most amount of dumplings you've had in a day?
In my younger days, I'm ashamed to tell you, but now if I do 5 in one sitting, I think that's my best day.
A lot. It's never good to eat that many at one time. You know?
They say anything is nice, do it twice.
And why do you have such a love for dumplings?
You know the little boy who took his lunch to Jesus? The Bible tells me it was 5 barley loaves. I think they made it was 5 dumplings, 2 small fish. Made from whole wheat flour. And that's why it fed a multitude, you know, it fed 5,000. If it were bread.
Okay, so you changed it from loaves to dumplings.
Yes,
okay,
5 barley loaves.
Your interpretation.
5 dumplings. Got to make it current, you see.
Right. No, but I love dumplings as well, especially with some ackee and saltfish.
That's why you have a fantastic show.
It's the
Flesh
best.
and blood did not reveal that to you, you know?
It's the best. So let's talk about you not being raised as a Seventh-day Adventist. You grew up as a Methodist. You were raised in the Methodist faith.
All my background, there were 3 religious communions, so Methodist, Anglicans, and Baptists. We grew up that way. In my community, there was no Adventist church. There was one Adventist family, and for most of the year, they were never there because they lived in England. So they would come out sometimes, because they have a property in my community, and they would come out sometimes, but there was one family 4 miles down the road, and they had this passion about wanting to make the community know what they believe. We laughed at them. So they built this huge church. When you think of 2 families, the church was 30 feet long by, I think, 18 feet wide or 20 feet wide. And I thought for them it was a huge church. You could drop that in a Methodist church 10 times. But so yes, we're Methodists, Anglicans, and Baptists. That's my background. No Adventist family members, no connection. But I had an inquisitive mind. I love to read. I love to inquire. My mother called me stubborn. That's her story. For me, it's an inquisitive mind. If you don't want me to go down that road, don't tell me you can't go down there. Because if you tell me I can't go, I am going to go. If you tell me I shouldn't go, I am going to try. And when I went to the Adventist meeting, we went there as boys to disturb them. We made noise on the outside, but there was something about the preacher. And, I said that if I ever grew up, of course I didn't want to be a pastor, but the fact that everything he said, he found it in the Bible. And so my desire to disturb now was changing to a desire to learn. To hear. And the more I was learning is the more I was being disturbed. Because now I said no, but I couldn't resist the fact that he was reading it from the Bible. And so I went home and, I never dare say to my parents, but the preacher, and God bless him, I buried him about 2 years ago. He baptized me when I was just about 14 and became a spiritual mentor. And he was my church pastor, but he had about 13 congregations.
Oh, wow.
So we would see him like once per quarter. But he made his presence felt. And so that's the background. When I decided to be baptized, my parents said, not in this house. You're not going to leave to join those 7 devil people. And I used to call them seven devil. And some of them behave like a little devilish sometimes, 7 devil. But God is amazing. So that's my background. Methodist, Anglican, and Baptist.
So what was the struggle like for you making the
decision?
The decision and the conversion. What was that struggle like? Because I'm sure there are people today that are struggling with that same decision.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can look them in their eye in the camera.
Absolutely.
And tell you, if you have an open Bible, an honest heart, and a clear conscience, we're going to be in the same church. I never thought I'd become an Adventist. Never in my wildest sense. And the struggle, you have the societal struggle, the sociological struggle, because now we are social creatures. We relate to the like crowd. Society is plagued with what some psychiatrists call the herd instinct. We follow the crowd. We're in the group. We don't like to be out of that, whether that group is a family group or your close friends and stuff.
Safety net.
Yes, and so the pressure was that it was uncommon. It was strange. And the entire community ganged up against them. Even if Baptists has differences with Anglicans and Methodists, because they all don't have the same identical doctrines, but they were bonded together by the fact that they all kept the same Sabbath, meaning Sunday. And these 7 devil people were coming to disturb the community. And worst, you ask about the struggle, if you ever wondered why my forehead is so shine, I used to love eating pork.
Wow.
And so some of the pork fat is just coming out.
Really?
Yes, so I had to try to get rid of it.
Wipe it away?
Yes.
Okay.
I loved eating pork. My father was a butcher. And these 7 devil people come with the strange stuff. Now, my church had this concept, eat anything as long as your stomach can take it. But after I became an Adventist, I said, but they never did eat crow or any of those stuff. And so the issue now of what you eat,
lifestyle
and
change
again
too.
he would grounded in the Bible. And I said, it makes sense. Because if you buy your car from Toyota, you sure wouldn't go to the Mazda company to ask them what kind of oil to put in your car. Or if you buy a car, you wouldn't go to a farmer to ask him how to treat your car. You're going to go to the manufacturer. Now, God made us, and he ought to know what's best for us.
Absolutely.
And that's where the seven, and now I can't call him seven devil anymore because he impacted and changed my life.
Yes.
That's where the blessed Seventh-day Adventist pastor really knocked the socks off my foot because he went to the Bible to tell me whether I eat or drink or whatever I do, I should do that to the glory of God. By the way, that's 1 Corinthians 10:31. And then he would go through the Bible and show that unclean foods was not just a Jewish stuff, that when God made the world, he made them clean and unclean. And strange enough, when he was about to send the flood, I always wondered until I began listening to the preacher. He said, the unclean ones went in there by twos, but the clean ones by seven. 7 pairs of clean ones, and only 1 pair of the unclean ones. Because he said after the flood, there would be no vegetables and herbs and stuff. And so that was when God allowed man to begin eating meat. And he did say what kind to eat. That if it's in the sea or the river, it must have fins and scales. If it's on the land, it must chew the cud and part the hoof. Now, if God made them all and made me, he ought to know what's best for me. And so that was part of the struggle. The issue of Sunday sacredness that I was taught all my life, and now I'm discovering in the Bible that God never made Sunday the Sabbath. The matter of what I should eat and drink, when in my religious connection, I would eat anything that runs, wriggles, or crawls. Well, or mostly. And so that was a struggle. And to compound it, the entire community turned against us. But there's something about being on God's side. I mentioned earlier, and I could say here, young people, something I said earlier about the herd instinct.
That grew,
Yes. It can be both good and bad. Depending on who comprises the herd.
Absolutely.
We don't like to be alone. We like this. We talk about pair group pressure. But the herd instinct and the pressure of your pairs can be negative. One of the things that I learned from the trial of Jesus, the Jews couldn't convince Pilate that Christ was guilty. All they tried, Pilate said, listen, I've examined him, I have brought others to examine him, and I find no fault in him. But here's how they got Pilate. His connection with Caesar. They said, if you let this man go, you are not Caesar's friend. And so the text said, and the voice of the people prevailed. That's the herd instinct. That's peer group pressure. Now, you've got to have spinal tenacity to know that there are some things worth standing for. There are some things worth fighting for. There's some things worth being alone for. Because you're answerable and accountable to your intelligence, your better judgment, and to your Creator. Sometimes we go against our best judgment and we become miserable for it. We go against our intelligence, we pay the price for it.
The consequences.
But yes. And to go against your Creator has eternal consequences. And so, in terms of the struggle, it was multifaceted, multiple. But there's no struggle that you have that God can successfully carry you through. My father decided to wash his hands, and my mother couldn't afford to send me to high school. But I was determined that that same stubbornness, now I try to find a way to use it. And
The inquisitive mind.
yes, that inquisitive mind, that curious,
Right,
inquisitive mind with some
right,
strength to it.
right,
Yeah.
right.
And so the struggle was real. And I say to young people in postmodern times, Gen Zers with your PlayStations and stuff, there's something about the value of your integrity. You've got to believe in something. Do not sacrifice your integrity on the altar of expediency because the crowd is doing it, because it may be expedient to do it. You may feel good for a while,
Yeah.
but if you have to have an internal frame of reference. There's got to be the real you that must be comfortable with it. And so in the struggle, you've got to ask yourself some questions. And depending on the answers you give yourself, you'll either be in the crowd or out of the crowd. And the answers I gave myself wouldn't allow me to be comfortable in the crowd.
Yeah. I grew up with this saying, show me your company and I'll tell
Yes,
you who
birds
you
of
are.
a feather
Flock together. So it's usually, the struggle is usually harder when it's the right thing.
Exactly.
And when it's the wrong thing, you tend to move, fall into it more easily.
And that's why they say eagles don't flock.
Yes.
Eagles have a way of soaring.
But
and flying by itself because it's comfortable in its own skin.
Yeah.
And God
Yeah.
made every young person to be an eagle.
Yeah.
You know, as I say that, there is this unique individuality that God blesses each person with.
Yeah.
You talk about the struggle.
Yeah.
Have you ever wondered, nobody else has your fingerprint.
Wow. Yeah.
Nobody else has your DNA.
Yes.
God, look in the mirror. The next time the crowd want to make you feel that you can only be a somebody if you're in the crowd, look in the mirror and say to the devil, God made me special, because you are special.
Yeah.
And so this pressure of the crowd sometimes becomes overbearing when we don't have a healthy sense of who we are and how God has made us unique and special. You know, I tell people that I'm never bothered by what others think because nobody can make you feel inferior unless you consent to it.
Absolutely.
That's it.
Absolutely.
And so in this question you ask about the struggle and the pressure and the crowd, there will never be a time in life when you won't have some of that. You'll have some of that in church, at your workplace, but it's real.
Yeah.
It's real life.
Yeah.
That's why the talk, the show.
Yes.
Real
talk.
Yes. Real talk.
Real talk. Now let's have some more real talk. You wanted to be an educator.
Yes.
Not a preacher, not a pastor.
No. None of that foolishness. None of that foolishness.
So tell us, why did you not pursue this, or did you? And what was the
Michelle,
turning point?
I love teaching.
Yes. Well, you're still teaching. It was just teaching the word of God. You're still teaching.
I'm a poor excuse for the good teacher now, you see?
No.
But I love dealing with young people.
Yeah,
And so I told you that the pastor who baptized me became my mentor. And then after he was transferred, they sent a fantastic young pastor, Raymond Whitfield Ricketts. To this day, I'd love to meet him again. Fantastic pastor. I mean, so the one who baptized me was a senior pastor.
Okay.
But good for his time and grounded us. But here come this young people's pastor. I mean, he's playing cricket with us. He's playing dominoes. He's playing stuff. And we would go to the ends of the earth with him. He's there with us. He comes to church, but make no mistake about it, he'll discipline you as your quint. Firm, but lovable. And he only spent a year and a few months. They transferred him. I said, listen, me being a pastor, and you're going to move me around when I don't want to move, that was part of the stubborn, the inquisitive nature. And so I decided I'm going to go to college to do education. And then I'll preach. So teaching will be my full-time employment. Preaching is what I love. But them conference people not going to move me around because I'm a teacher and not working for them. And so I went to West Indies College. I got enrolled in the Department of Education. Was loving it. And then the teacher got on my nerve, and the classmates, they said, "You sound like you're preaching when you're talking to us." The teacher said, "Your composition sounds like a sermon."
Wow.
So I left school.
Oh, no. Wow.
I took a semester off.
Wow.
But maybe the mistake I made, the minute I left school, I went to conduct a crusade someplace.
You just went right into it. You just went right into it.
I guess when God has his hand on you for something,
or
you
order
can't
your
esca-
steps.
You can't escape it.
Yeah.
So that is it. I still love teaching, but
But you're still teaching. Yes.
I guess I was going in it for the wrong reason.
Yeah.
So that was my short-lived educator's life. Yeah.
Okay. So we talked about your traveling all over the world. Well, there's still some places you need to go. I keep saying all over the world.
There's something about the travel, I should have said this to you. So I'm flying into, I don't know where in the world I was going. The only thing I knew is that the flight I was on had to stop in Panama. It was this huge 7-4. I don't know why it had to stop in Panama to pick up passengers or whatever. So I got to my seat toward the front of the plane. My mother taught me to be respectful and respectable. And so there was this gentleman sitting I'm in the aisle seat, he's at the window seat, and the middle seat was empty. So I said, "Good evening." He's down in his newspaper, and I thought he never heard me. So I turned up the volume a tad bit more, and I said, "Good evening." He didn't answer. I said, "Okay, you don't bother me, I don't bother you." So I sat down in my seat, and the air hostess do their stuff, or you don't pay them any attention. They're telling you. I never pay those air hostesses any attention.
Me too, yeah.
And about a few miles getting into landing, that huge plane starts dancing. I don't know if it heard Vibes Cartel music or Shabarang. So I don't know what your top singers here, but that huge jet started doing some dancing up in the air, and for the first time in all my traveling, those air stuff that the air hostess was saying, if there's turbulence, you put on the mask and put it on. For the first time, it popped out the ceiling. I can't breathe and stuff. And everybody's screaming. Who jumped and hugged up and who jumped?
The man.
I am not accustomed to being hugged by a man. And I had fun without showing it on my face. And then when the plane settled down, he was apologizing and stuff. I said, "No, you're good. You're good." But I enjoy traveling. I do enjoy traveling.
And what is the best place that you've traveled to?
That's fascinating.
Yes.
Different things. I think Canada is maybe one of the cleanest countries I've gone to. I think Germany has the best cemeteries.
Really?
Yes, that was the first place I saw these really nice marble tombs and nicely organized. I even lay down on one, took a picture,
Wow.
Yeah, you've been, I love watching the changing of the guards at Buckingham's Palace.
Yeah,
and you have some wonderful places in the Caribbean.
So you have a lot of favorite places.
Yes.
Not just one.
Not just one.
Okay. What about the worst places you've ever traveled to? Or maybe the worst experience?
The worst experience, apart from that somersaulting plane, I can't call the country, but I went to South America. I'll just say it that way.
Okay. We'll take that.
Yes. And
we'll take that.
The area I was in, they had these huge lizards, iguanas, but those seem to be like
they're here too.
Crocodiles.
Oh, they're here. Yeah.
And then I learned that they cook them.
Okay.
That they cook them in soup, they cook them in rice and stuff. And for that week, I never ate more bread in all my life.
You lost a lot of weight?
No, I ate a lot of fruits and I drink a lot of stuff. So No, I never lost.
Oh, my
But I ate more bread that week than maybe all my life put together. Because unless they bake the lizard in the bread, yes. So for that week, bread and cheese was my very good companion. So that would have
No
been
dumplings.
I'm not sure what they do with the flour. So
You didn't touch it.
I
passed
I
on
was
that.
staying at a hotel where, of course, they never had dumplings, but I didn't trust anything else, and so I felt comfortable with the bread and the
Safe.
cheese.
Safe.
Yeah. So
Safe.
in terms of countries, that would have been my worst experience from the food side of it. But I love the other side of it because I came back with well, your games here are full. Forgive me, you know. You play football with your hand. Who in the world play football with your hand?
Yeah.
In the Caribbean, football, of course,
Yeah.
of course, you play football with your foot.
Yeah.
But
Hence the name, football.
he was a baseball player.
Yeah.
He died tragically after I left, but I had the honor of leading him to Christ, and he gave me a ball autographed by a number of baseball stars, including himself, and I still have it on my desk.
Nice.
So it was not just the bread story. I came back with that moving story. As a matter of fact, when I got home, when I got there, he used to be in pathfindering before he left the church. Young people, don't allow the glitter of the stardom to pull you away from Christ.
Yeah.
This is real talk.
Yeah.
You see, there are times when, for a while, church may not seem meaningful to you. But take it from this old man. After the glitter is gone, after you've danced the night away, and your head come down to touch a restless pillow, the music, the drugs, the sex can't give you the lasting peace that you seek. So he was in pathfindering. He left the church, and God brought him back in that short series I was there for. When I got back to Jamaica, he would call me, and he would use the youth staff at camp would say all present and accounted for. So you're in charge of the unit. You're supposed to report. And so he was reporting for himself and his family. All present and accounted for. But he had an accident. He had one of those fast speed bikes he would ride. And had an accident, sustained brain damage and stuff. Never made it. They airlifted him to the Medellin public hospital, but he died. And his wife called, and I still hear her screaming. But so I left, not just with the bad encounter, but there are two sides to every coin.
Yeah, and I'm sure you've also met a lot of interesting people for
Indeed.
days that you could talk about.
There was a pregnant woman who walked to the tent.
Wow.
And her friends would tease her. She'd go and have the baby at the tent. She was 9 months pregnant.
Oh, my goodness.
And she decided she's not missing any of the meeting.
Wow.
And of course, she missed the
Wow.
last night because the baby came and that.
Oh, my goodness.
So, you leave with,
Yeah.
with those interesting,
Yeah.
humorous pieces.
Thank you for watching another edition of Real Talk with Michelle. This show was uplifting, enlightening, impactful, and insightful that we could not end it midstream. So tune in for part 2 as we learn more about this powerhouse man of God, Glen O. Samuels. Stay tuned. If there's someone you would like to see on the show, feel free to contact us at realtalkwithmichelle1@gmail.com. Until then, let's have some real talk.